Okay, I thought tonight we could talk about letting life happen. So it's really another way of saying allow everything to be as it is. When we hear this, we wonder what that actually means. It sounds good, but what does it actually mean? When we really stop to think about it, we can have some questions about it, like, well, if I just allowed everything to just be as it is, what would ever change? I just go on being however I always have been. Or I would just, if I allowed everything to just be as it is and let life happen, wouldn't I just become a doormat? Let life just roll over me. Or, who would I be if I didn't have a position and a set of opinions and a place to stand on? If I let life just happen, who would I be? What would I do? Would I do anything? Would I have anything left to stand on? So these kind of questions are sort of the mind's way of objecting to this kind of pointer to just let life happen. So it's when we hear something like this, it's we can hear it and it's almost like one of those sort of new agey spiritual sayings that if you just say it, it sounds pleasant. It could go on a greeting card or at the bottom of an email to a friend. But when we actually think about putting it into practice, like how would that really mean? What would my life look like? Then it starts to take on a little flavor. So there's theory. Theory is one thing, and then practice is something else. There was a baseball player back when I was growing up, and he has become famous later in life for saying things that on the surface sound ridiculous, but actually have a certain wisdom in it as well. His name was Yogi Berra. And one of the sayings that I love is that he's talking about this idea of theory versus practice. And one of the things that he said was, in theory and practice are the same thing. But in practice, they're different. So it's like this with this saying of letting life happen. When we really begin to consider it, how I would navigate life if I really took that to heart, what would life really look like? It really is counterintuitive to everything that we've grown up with, because in this culture especially, there's this sense of striving towards our goals, always working towards self-improvement, making life better. The future is brighter. I may not have, reached my fulfillment yet, but I'm on my way. I'm headed in that direction. I'm working towards it. So there's this really built-in sense that somehow the future will be happier than it is right now. I may be reasonably happy now, but future will be even better. We'll be even happier then. So we can hold that out as a future goal, almost like the carrot in front of the donkey. Like, I'll be happy when I finish school. I'll be happy when I meet my soulmate. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when I have kids. I'll be happy when those kids get out of school and leave home. I'll be happy when I'll get a job. I'll be happy when I retire. Whatever. But it's always, the point is that it's always out in the future somewhere, right? And the presumption is that somehow there's a possibility to be happier if certain things play out in the future, of course, than it is to be happy now. So it's sort of a denial of what's possible to recognize now in favor of some imagined circumstances that will make us happier at some later point. Right? So there's a couple of problems with this way of, living our life, really. We can think back of how much of our life is spent with those future goals, that future anticipation, that hope. Because with that hope, there's also an anxiety, right? Because we know, as much as we may hope for some particular goal, there's also a recognition that life doesn't always work out the way we hope, the way we want. There are these other 8 billion people that are mostly doing the same thing. So it's not all going to go to everyone's favor all of the time. Sometimes it comes our way, sometimes it doesn't. So we know that, but still, we spend a great deal of our life energy sort of striving towards creating some situation that will result in my happiness, right? In the future, always in the future. But we're quite certain of 3 things. One is that we know what we want to make us happy. And then we know what we need to do to get there, sort of our path to get there. And we're also quite certain that we'll be happier when we do get there. So it's, even though we know deep down that life is uncertain, things don't always go our way, but we are quite certain that if we pursue this sort of lifestyle plan, to strive towards some future destination, we should get there. We should get there. But what this ignores is that, it sort of goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that life always happens in the present. So this anticipation of being happier sometime in the future is a denial of the possibility of that happiness occurring now. But we hear that and we sort of know that it's true. So, but we do sort of a workaround. We think, well, I know that life only happens in the present. I get that. But if I plan for the future and what I want to happen then one day that future will become the present moment and I'll be happy. Right? So that's the workaround. That I get to believe in the future, but knowing that life only happens in the present. But that whole pattern is actually a denial of the possibility of happiness now, in this moment, in our current situation, whatever that is, sort of in our as-is state. So it's a belief that what is required is a certain set of circumstances, whatever we imagine that is, the right combination of events and people in our world and that situation. And if I just put those pieces together, then I'll be happy. So it's a presumption that happiness is dependent on external circumstances. But when we do that, when that is our underlying assumption, then we become the victim we become the we're on the dog end of the leash rather than the handle end of the leash, because our happiness, without assumption, our happiness is dependent on what unfolds in the world, and the world has a way of unfolding as it will. We may like it, we may not like it, but if that's what's happening, that is what's happening. So this saying of, let life happen, it sounds like a relinquishment of our authority, of our independence. We're just letting life do whatever it does. But it's also can be seen as a matter of trust, right? Trusting life to give us the experiences that we need to learn and grow by. So we really have two choices. We can either try to manipulate life to get what we want, be frequently disappointed or hurt or disheartened by how life actually unfolds. Sometimes it'll go our way, of course, but often it won't turn out exactly that. So that's one possibility of, regular but somewhat intermittent suffering. The other one is to allow life to unfold as it will, and be on board for that and enjoy the ride. I mean, that's the other alternative. So this allowing life to just happen, what would that actually look like? So just in practical terms, we could take something like meditation, right? So there's, I mean, really roughly speaking, there can be two ways of doing that. One is to sit down and try to make some experience happen. In other words, a goal-oriented activity, a doing, right? I'm going to meditate in order to achieve a high state, in order to, receive some, grand realization, in order to get enlightened, whatever our goal may be. Or we could just sit down and see what happens, right? See what life looks like when we're not trying to make something else happen. In other words, when we step out of the managerial role and just watch what happens, still alive. We're just not trying to manage our experience. We could also take some other activity. Let's say we're trying to learn a skill. I mean, we can be learning a skill in order to have some particular ability to make some money, to be able to buy a house, and then we know that we'll be happy in the house. Okay, so that's a series of events that strung out into the future, where what is happening now is somehow subordinated to the real desire, which is to be happy when we have the house. I mean, the other way to engage in that kind of learning process or project or something, work activity, hobby, whatever it is to just enjoy it for the pleasure of learning, the pleasure of whatever activity that we're doing. So what we're talking about is not to cease doing things, but to cease doing things for a particular goal. We can still engage in the activities, we can still continue to learn, but the enjoyment is from the learning itself in moment to moment in that process, rather than always doing it to achieve some future satisfaction. Okay, let's take another example. We can I'd suggest that it's more useful to, if we find ourselves suffering over some internal conflict, it's more useful to investigate that as it's currently occurring, and look at that deeply and objectively, than it is to think, well, you know, if I just got enlightened, then I wouldn't have to deal with all of this, right? So that's sort of projecting some future state in order to avoid what's right in front of us. You know, sort of like, you know, eating your appetizer at a meal, and while you're doing that, you're thinking about dessert already. So you're not really present for whatever it is that's happening. So it's just that, it's just taking enjoyment from the actual activity, the actual perceptions, the actual sensations, which often don't need the engagement of our analyzing, judgmental, opinionated mental processes. And I understand that that thought stream also appears on the screen of awareness, just like perceptions and sensations do. The difference is that the perceptions and sensations are have a degree of reality that the conceptualizing mind doesn't. Because the conceptualizing mind is always about reality. It's never reality itself. It's always trying to describe or interpret or explain or judge or have an opinion about reality, but it's never the actual direct experience of our primary senses. So if we can just, the mind will still do what it does. We can let it do that. But if our attention is really on what's actually occurring in the moment, then we're present for it. We're present for the reality of what's actually happening, unfolding in that moment. Again, a completely unique experience unfolding every moment, never to be repeated, never happened before, and precisely the way it happens in every moment. So this movement, you know, towards future goals, it's really founded on, you know, trying to come to a resolution of life's big questions. You know, trying to understand what this is all about. You know, what's my purpose? What's my destiny? How will that be fulfilled? So that's the overall movement. But if we try to package that in terms of a specific goal, rather than just allowing our life to unfold and be attentive to how that's unfolding and trust life to show us what needs to be seen, then each unfolding has value, because whatever's true, whatever this life is actually really about, is present, has to be present in this and every moment. But we can fool ourselves really by thinking, well, you know, I'll have the real experience when, you know, enlightenment happens at some future time. But that concept is really a denial that what enlightenment is, and that it is what is present for this moment. It has to be. What we truly are couldn't be absent ever, right? So that means it must be present now. And there's an opportunity to see that. It doesn't require an extraordinary experience. It requires our willingness to actually look to see what is already not only present, but fully functioning. So we tend to miss this pointer of letting life happen, allowing everything to be as it is. We miss it in two ways. One way is that we don't understand it. And the other way is we don't like it, right? So the first way we miss it by not understanding it. By that I mean, we try to do it, right? So we hear like, let life happen. And the first thought was, well, how do I do that, right? So it's important to see that any effort to try to do it is still a doing, right? So we're still trying to do something. For what reason, right? To improve my experience, to get somewhere, to meet a goal, in this case, to get enlightened, right? So we think, okay, well, what I have to do is just try to let life happen. That's what I have to do. Or we can try to outsmart it and think, well, I'll just not try, which is, of course, is another way of trying. Right? So we can just see that game, that mental game, and recognize that life is already happening. Right? So we can either be on board with that or not. We can either try to manipulate that, manipulate our experience for our own gain, or not. And the other way we can miss the pointer is just to decide that we don't really like it, right? We'll just ignore it. We like this seeking spiritual identity idea. It gives us things to do. It gives us, it gives us meditation practice. It gives us, an idea that habits need to be overcome or refined. So that's another thing we can do. It gives us lots of metaphysical ideas. We can, put our dietary preferences through the, spiritual doorway there to see if they meet the grade. So there's lots of things that we can do, but what the spiritual identity is not so fond of is concepts like no self and surrender, and doesn't like that so much. So this idea of letting life happen is more in that vein, where if we really allow life to just unfold, where's the need for the spiritual identity? If there's nothing really to do other than let life happen, then an identity sort of loses its grip, right? If we're seeking and trying to attain and pursuing this goal, it feels like a noble quest. It's very empowering. It's very alluring. But just letting life happen. I mean, even when you said, if your friends ask you what you're doing, well, I'm just letting life happen. It's just not that impressive, right? So there's that identity that comes with, the spiritual search is sort of undermined. And in fact, if we take it far enough, even, our normal everyday self-identity has the rug pulled out from under us, because pretty soon there's nothing to do other than to be present for whatever it is that's happening. So another difficulty with this pointer is that for a lot of us, we got into spirituality because we weren't happy with how life was showing up already. So, there's an effort to sort of change our experience, upgrade our experience, from a normal everyday thing to something much grander than that. So when we say allow everything to be as it is, then we imagine, well, then what? Then it'll just be what it's always been. There's this, sort of pop psychology catchphrase that says, defines insanity as doing the same things you've always done and expecting different results. So here we're saying, well, isn't that what letting life happen? Wouldn't that be like that? Life would look like it always has been. Why should I expect different results? But I'd suggest that the one thing that we haven't tried is to actually let life happen. We've always been trying to manipulate it, always trying to improve it, sort of maneuver it to our own advantage. So this is something radically different than what's probably been tried before. So by letting life happen, it actually doesn't disable us, because the interpretation is, well, if I just let life happen, then am I really saying that I don't care? I don't mind what happens. Am I really saying that? No. But it's acknowledging that what is happening is what's happening. It's not arguing that it shouldn't be happening, or the other person shouldn't do that, or someone's really to blame, or somebody should do something about it, or I shouldn't have done that, or whatever argument that we have with what actually happened is our argument with life, right? So by saying let life happen, we're not saying I'm good with how the world is, or I don't see any problems out there, but we're saying that we recognize that is what's happening, right? So we're not arguing that it should or shouldn't be. We acknowledge that is. That's the one thing that we can say for sure. When we say should or shouldn't be, then we've somehow elevated ourselves to be sort of put ourselves in a godlike position of knowing how things should be and shouldn't be. But all we can say from our own direct knowledge is that it is as it is. So it doesn't mean we have to like it, right? It's just an acknowledgement that it is what it is. And then what that does is actually frees us up to respond to whatever the situation, the actual immediate situation that appears before us, frees us up to respond to that, because we haven't wasted all our energy arguing with what should and shouldn't be, or what is just presented as a conceptual issue. We have the choice in every moment to respond, either from our conditioning, old patterns, which are never going to be truly appropriate for whatever the situation is. Okay, so what we're looking at is this idea of creating a future goal in which where happiness resides, right? That's the basic movement. Whether we're talking about buying a house or getting a job or getting enlightened, it's that same movement, like what I'm hoping to get, what will make me fulfilled, complete, however we phrase it, isn't possible now. It's only possible given a certain set of circumstances, right? But let's if we just look back on our life and remember times in our life when we were genuinely happy, whatever a particular situation was. Wouldn't it be true to say that at those times, we didn't want anything to be other than it was? We were happy with it. Why would we, right? So there was no wanting it to be different, which is just a simple way of saying that is that we were good with it. We were good with the situation. We said yes to it. We were open, fully open to what was happening. We were on board. We liked it, right? And we were happy. Right? And other times in our life when we were, let's say, seriously unhappy, if we think that back and remember times like that, there were times when we didn't like what was happening. Was it basically saying no to what was happening? I don't like this. I don't want this. This isn't right. This isn't fair. Right? And we conclude, therefore, that we're happy when this certain set of circumstances happens, and we're unhappy when that set of circumstances happen, as if our happiness is dependent on external events. But I'd suggest that we miss the whole point. And the point is that we're happy when we say yes to what's happening, and we're unhappy when we say no. Right? And by saying yes, again, I don't mean that we agree with what's happening. I'm just saying that we acknowledge that what's happening without argument. That it is what it is, and this is how life is showing up in that moment. We can receive it, right? Receive it in a sense of openness, a sense of allowing, or we can dispute it and push it away and reject it, say no. Okay? One way makes us happy, the other makes us unhappy. Right? Regardless of the actual circumstances. Okay, there's an even deeper way of looking at this, though. And that is that what we truly are as consciousness, spacious awareness, already and always is saying a silent yes. Never says no. Never rejects any experience. Right? It is present for every experience. The mind may or may not like it. It may or may not be advantageous to us. We may not like it at all. It may be hard, may be painful. But that spacious awareness will be present even for that, without any resistance whatsoever. It is its very nature to be open and receptive. So it's not us, me, separate self, me, trying to be open, trying to be in alignment with life, trying to let life happen. It is the recognition of our essential nature as awareness that is already open. It can't be otherwise. It is what it is. It is that spaciousness is not a thing. It's not a form. It is infinitely no thing. Infinite enough that everything appears within it. It resists nothing. it doesn't hold preferences, right? Is that not your experience, that your awareness is present for the best of times and the worst of times? And the mind may struggle desperately or may be happy as can be, but that awareness is present for both. And since that awareness is formless, it's not subject to hurt. It's not subject to harm. And because there is this sort of open-hearted acceptance of whatever is happening, it is at peace, right? Because it's not wanting anything else. It's not, the awareness itself isn't demanding that anything be different than it is, ever. Because it's not demanding that anything be different than it is, there's a happiness. It's our innate happiness, the happiness that is uncaused. Happiness that isn't dependent on external circumstances. Because it's simply spacious. It is what is allowing all experiences to happen without preference. The mind, of course, has preferences, no doubt. The body has preferences. And that's as it should be. You know, we can try to make the mind and the body not have preferences. Good luck. What doesn't have preferences is this innate awareness already. So our job isn't to try to, subjugate ourselves to not having any preferences. That just doesn't work. What does work is just the recognition of what we actually are already. And with that recognition, there comes an effortlessness to it. Because we recognize that we don't need anything to be other than it is. We recognize that regardless of how circumstances may improve in the future, may be different in the future, that's nice, but that we won't be any happier than we are now, because we're already happy. We're already at peace. If there is no desire for things to be different than they are in this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment, then there's a continual, you don't even say it in your head, but there's a continuous yes to however life is showing up. It's the no that separates us from life. You can feel it in your body, you can feel that contraction, that, self, personal self-empowerment, no. Yes just leaves you open. So this instruction, the suggestion to let life happen is a hint. Is a hint of what our true nature actually is doing already. Everyone's true nature, all of us, even those non-seeker types, all of us already are, in our deepest essence, are already allowing everything to be as it is. It's just the belief in our mind and our opinions, ideas, beliefs that we believe that we're doing something other than that. saying yes to this, no to that, wanting this, avoiding that. That whole movement of trying to manipulate life to our advantage is mind-oriented. It's totally a function of our conditioning, our mental beliefs and opinions. But all the while, what we truly are already, this infinitely spacious capacity to notice everything, that is already without preferences. That is already welcoming, receiving open-heartedly everything that ever happens. It's just its nature to do so. That is our fundamental nature. And that fundamental nature is already at peace, is already happy. And when we discover that carrot that says happiness is only out there in the future somewhere, just loses its allure, right? We can still engage in life, but now, moment to moment, day to day, there's the sense of life already being fulfilled, life already being complete, without the imposition of any requirement for any particular thing to happen. Whatever happens within that infinite field of awareness that we already are. That's the recognition of how life unfolds. It unfolds not in opposition to us, but it actually unfolds within that which we are. We find ourselves moving, enjoying life, because there's no longer that wanting, that sense of lack. There's already a sense of completion, fulfillment, regardless of what's happening. And that's the joy, that's the peace, that's the rest, that's the effortlessness.